Welcome back to the channel of Truth, Trust and Transparency. Today I have a very special site for a very special mate. We're going to dig into this one to see what we think of it. Now, he has sent it through to me and said the following. Hi Dave, as discussed, I think this could be a good 3 to 4 bedroom play. Median price discrepancy between 3 to 4 bedroom is 190 grand in Warrnambool. And then subdivide and sell the back block, which has its own access to reduce the mortgage. Wouldn't pursue building anything due to limited access to finance in self-managed super fund. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for all your help. Now, let's, without further ado, we've got the brief. We know what they want to do. Let's dig into it, shall we? First and foremost, you know the drill. We're looking at the data first. I think there was Warrnambool pop up a few weeks, maybe even months ago. Honestly, I'm creating a video every day, so sometimes the timeline is a little blurred. But Warrnambool, fresh set of eyes, $600,000 typical price. In the past year, it's went up 0.01%. It's went backwards 3% in the last 3 years. In 5 years, it's done 40%. 10 years, it's done 87%. So let's have a look at the data in a bit more detail, shall we? Now, as that message suggested, there are some big discrepancies between 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. 3 and 4 is the most. It being almost $200,000. Again, this is a really good way for you guys to be able to pick up some capital growth quickly, is to find something that's a 3 bedroom and go through the process of converting it to a 4 bedroom. Sometimes you can be smart and do that before you even own the property. Again, we know Warrnambool, not too bad on RCS scores, definitely. Reasonable dwellings and population, a little bit of flood risk, and plenty of infrastructure spend. Growth rate cycle. Now, we know Warrnambool is a very, very slow and steady performer. Nothing crazy. Obviously had its growth run, but this is kind of like your trade-off with your regional town. Do you just stick with something that is a little slower performer to set and forget for a long-term time frame? Depends again on how long this particular person wants to hold this asset for. For Ursad, which isn't the lowest, and it's pretty typical renter to owner ratio. Demand, there is about half as much as demand for 4 bedrooms, and the affordability. Affordability is right on 30. So it's not at the ceiling, but it is getting there. 30% of the market are investors, and for Ursad. So not too bad. I think the only real issue that you need to think about is the play on this property because of that slow growth. Remember, take COVID out of this. I always think majority of suburbs have had this COVID boom, but prior to that, we look at the 10 years before that and what it has been doing. Okay, so stock on market, short term is decreasing. Days on market is allegedly decreasing down to 33 days, which is cool. Inventories has been creeping up a bit, 1.1 months, so still not too much inventory, even though it is increasing. Vacancy rates, this is pretty interesting here. Vacancy rates has went from 15 almost a year ago up to 35, so almost doubled vacancy rates. So the one thing that I want to find out and look into is why has this happened? And I need to look at what's for rent and why has it been vacant for such a long amount of time. Affordability, touch too high, not the worst thing in the world. Again, I think this is just one of those sort of park plays. So park is in, park it in your portfolio. Let's have a look a little bit around where this asset is located. Then we'll go into the listing. Then we'll go into any overlays. Then we'll go into a little bit around what we can do with it. So for those of you playing along at home and don't know where Warrnambool is, we have the main city of Melbourne. Then we're heading southwest, Geelong, Werribee. We're hitting Geelong. We're going past everything. We've got Ballarat up here. We've got Ararat. And, just before we hit kind of, the Peninsula and Adelaide and all that kind of stuff, we've got Hamilton. I know that's popular with some people. And we have Warrnambool all the way down here. So In terms of where this asset sits in the scheme of things with Warrnambool, it's obviously on the south side next to the reserve and the river and just off the golf course. It's kind of in maybe a little isolated pocket. Here. Seems to be a short walk into town, but definitely not in the built-up suburbs, like sort of out in these pockets and areas. If we look at itself, the river on its back door is something that we need to look out for. And it's just a tidy little allotment of, 7 houses here. So, and then we back off the reserve. Now, in terms of distance, I'd say we're probably a little bit far away to have any issues with lights. The other thing, because I can see the light poles here, the other thing as well is I think if you look at where people are coming from, a lot of people are obviously coming from the north side. So traffic you're not going to get too much traffic from people here. We do have, however, the speedway. So I wonder how much that lights up and how popular that is, because McDonald and becomes Harris is that sort of main thoroughfare. So, if they like their speedway and there's plenty of people heading out that way, then potentially something we need to look at and consider and how often that occurs. We can see that there is obviously some lot there. We've got a garage and then we have the house. So let's have a look at it from street view. Okay, so next door neighbours is interesting. It's like a little store, and then it obviously falls away down towards the rear. Power pole in the front yard. Look, it's not ideal. However, it's probably favourably positioned out of the way. It looks like some sort of rendered brick construction, double car garage, easy side access. If we go up, the footy oval's all the way down there, so pretty safe. We look at the quality of the houses. Let's go around the back way. So, oh shit. Well, there we go. Google Maps hasn't been updated in a while. So 2022, they've split this block here into 4, which is pretty cool. Can we go down this back way here? I don't think we can. That's a shame. But as we can see here, it falls off and away down to that first lake, and then the river's past there. So if you think for the water to get up that high, then it would inundate a lot of the houses over there. So telling me that flood might not be too much of an issue. See if there's anything the dates can tell us. 2010. (2008). Yeah, so not much changing, to be honest. I mean, the house kind of looks like it moves, but it obviously didn't happen like that. Yeah, so it looks pretty stock standard. One thing I'm keen to dig into is the listing photos, because remember, we can always pick up some things about the house in here. So tidy front yard. There it is there. So it's rear access. Crazy distance from the water, the lake, the river. Yeah, so that's what we're looking at before when we're looking back from there. Nice big wide block. Okay, so heater and cooler the size of a human. It doesn't look terrible like the timber floorboards. A lot of this stuff can just be painted. A couple of different floorboards, maybe an extension. Tidy fireplace, we like that for the cold Victorian winters. Kitchen is huge, dated, could do with an update. Can probably be okay as is. The floor looks warped there, I don't know why. Man, this is old school. So again, I'd be talking to property managers, see if that's up to standard with the people of Shepparton or if it's something that needs updating. Not too sure. Nice cornice details. Nothing too bad with this. Obviously an older style building. Again, not giving too much away. Bathroom is, like a bathtub. It's cool. Yeah, so there was some sort of extension, of course. Okay. This is the floor plan that we're after. And I see exactly what he's talking about. And look, kitchen. So that when we saw the difference in floorboards, I guarantee it was probably the difference between those two rooms. This looks like it's an addition on the end there. So kitchen's added on. Decent size. Yes, I think you can convert that. I'd be looking at if you can remove these walls too, because open that up, and then that's potentially an 8.5 meter room by a 3.5 meter room. So that's plenty to fit. Can you open up this wall too here? Potentially. Kitchen, dining, bit of flow there. Plenty of room for a TV and that sort of stuff. That may even be an extension on the side too. Not too sure. But yeah, I can see that being a conversion quite easily, or bringing it to at least there for a bedroom. Definitely agreed. These are some older photos. Okay. So it's pretty tidy, pretty well put together. It's interesting to see it without... perfect. So if I got my photos right, yeah, that is the room that we're looking to convert. So that would be, just throwing up that wall there. You may have to relocate the heater and converting that to a bedroom, but looks very doable. Bathroom has been the same, so good thing about that is that if there were leaks, you'd be able to tell the bathroom would change. Really, for the last 5 years, people wouldn't leave a leak, or there would be sizable or some sort of notice that it has been leaking. You'd be able to see it. This is the backyard and sort of makeshift back fence. There you go. We're getting into 2019 again. So this is that space that we're thinking about converting. I think you got more than enough room if you want to chuck in that. It's not, look, don't get me wrong, it's not the perfect floor plan to do it, but it can still be done. Especially a little 3x3 kids room. Couple little bolt-ons here. And this is sort of the backyard, back fence. Interesting. Okay, so the address is pretty much zoned the same as all the others. We've got obviously some planning overlays. There's not too much on this, not bushfire, not flood affected. We can see where the easements are, which are great. So I'm not too concerned. There's also no public housing in this area. One thing that interests me that you mentioned, that the developer or whoever's developed this block has honestly smashed it out of the ballpark. They've got 4 dwellings. So they've got access off the main road for this one. This is the duplex. They've got access off the side street for that. Access off the side street for this one here. And then they've got access off there. What this made me think of is, and look, you'll need to dig into the local council. It might cost you the demolition of a shed, but if you put up a backyard, if you put up a back fence, right? You put up a back fence here. Could you put a duplex on there? Now, I don't know. You tell me. The frontage here was 20, let me see. 11 and 11 is 22. Currently on this block here, we have 20. So I'd be wanting to check with council, but maybe you can throw up a fence, subdivide this, and as you said, play self-managed super fund. I get it. But, looking outside of that there is potential because, and I looked at one of these the other week, sometimes because it's such a low building cost, and I'll show you why. So the finished product of one of these was 510 and the other one was 480. It looks like it sold off the plan. 2013 to 2017, 510. So there you go, 425, 680, 1.5 mil. That's crazy. So one thing you need to think about here is if you can retain this house, if you can put up a fence and retain this house, then you almost get this back land for free, because if you buy it, say for, what's it listed as? Look, it's listed 620, 680. If you can carve that off, say, right, and your house goes from being worth, say you buy it for 650. If you carve it off and the house is now worth 550, you've essentially paid $100,000 land price. Now, if you can split that in two and you put a duplex tent on, that means you pay a $50,000 land price for each of these. And all those other costs, because you're keeping it, are almost sunk into it. Now, if you can get, and if that's sold, look, it's hard to put a price on this, but if these are selling for 550, I mean, how wide is that block? It's an interesting little game they've played with this stuff here. But if you can sell those for, say, if you can sell either the house or one of the houses for, call it 610, 600 grand. My land price is 50, my planning is 50, maybe on something that cheap I've got 100 grand worth of interest. But you've got holding income, which is great. And the build price out here is probably going to be really cheap. It's probably 2-story. It might be 300 grand or something like that. So you still got a little bit of margin. And even if you didn't, what you could consider and running the numbers on is say, okay, well, I'm in this for 650. I'm spending 100 grand on planning, 750, 100 grand on interest, 850, and then for another 600 grand, 1.45. You could be in at, say, 1.45. But you could have 3 assets, and the back 2, don't get me wrong, could be renting at $500 each, and then the front house could be renting at $550. So automatically, then you have $1,550. I'll just work out the maths. 80 grand a year on 145 worth of debt. You got a 5.5% yield. So inside of super, does something like this make sense? Or maybe not. Again, need to speak to your accountant, speak to the broker that I know you use, and just get their thoughts. This could be a good little play, like outside of super and respectively. Is it a deal? I think you got to remember, this is a long-term hold. Because it's a long-term hold and you're not going to make heaps of money, even if I said 50 grand for stamps, 50 grand for the land, let's just say, 50 grand for planning, that's 100 grand, another 100 grand in interest, that's 200 grand, cost you 300 grand for the build, that's 500 grand. Then you've got, GST and tax. It might not make sense to buy it to sell off, but where it could make sense is to buy, subdivide, put there, and then hold the 3 assets, right, for the rental income. And then you can be strategic of, in time, once those GRs get to the number that they need to hit, then you can sell off one by one and maybe retain the front dwelling with a lower LVR on it. You might sell them when they're 700 grand each. You got that's 1.4 million if you were to sell each side. So that's the 1.4 million costs, and you might have little to nothing left on the front house. That might be a way to do it. I don't know if again, you need to talk to local builders in the area, because I'm just spitballing here, but I don't know if it'll make sense to just develop. Potentially, yes, you can sell off the land too. But again, by the time, let's look at what land is selling for actually. Okay, so land 2020, 2024, Oh, that's a huge block. 2012. I might put that 12 months back on. So what are these blocks selling for? 300? How big's that? That's 12. See, look at this. This is what worries me. Nice big block, right? And this is $300,000 for $1,267. I think what you'll find is by the time you carve this off, and you've got 1,000 square meter block, and it's 500, and you sell it for 180 grand. By the time you pay the money in council to get the DA approved, any subdivision works you need to do to get services to that block, there could be 100 grand in costs there. And then if you're selling it for 180, you make 80 grand, then you've got to pay GST, then you've got to pay tax. You don't really make any money, and it's taking you 12 to 18 months. This is why I also say to people, you need to be careful when you develop in these really, really cheaper areas, because the margin's just not there. So selling the land, you might not have the margin. You need to get really crystal clear on what you can sell them for. There's not a lot of land examples. Talk to the agent, not the same agent that you're trying to buy the house off. I think the best play that makes perfect sense to me is to actually, outside of personal name, outside of self-managed super fund, if I was to buy this to try to get the two on the back and then retain all. So you just have that rental income. You can sell one to pay down the debt, or you can sell two, pay down the debt in one, or sell the front and keep the two at the back. You have some options there. I don't know if it'll stack if it's just a land play. And I'm not sure, again, if it will stack if you're just buying to sell off, build and sell off. You need to dial in your numbers and a feasibility a little bit more inside self-managed super fund, which was your question. Yes, I think you can convert the house, so that's a good tick, something to pursue. Do I think it makes sense? Maybe not in terms of that land play, because I don't think the money's there. It probably gives you more options if you do it outside of self-managed super fund, but I mean, an interesting deal nonetheless, and it is on market. There is also, in this pocket, there's not a heap for rent, say 420. I mean, these are big properties, but like 420, 480. Yeah, there's not too much for rent. Let's show me houses in the last 12 months. Contact agent. So these are interesting. This is an interesting little development down here. These are duplexes. So if you can get 900, GR, then it makes sense. Holy dooly, 900, huge GR. Who the hell is paying 900 grand in Warrnambool? So that is a duplex. A great, decent finish, shit backyard. Let's have a look. So the duplex there has a 9-meter frontage. It tells me, and a 6-meter frontage. So it tells me if you've got a block size that's got a width of 20 meters, then you can do the duplex. And if you do a duplex that achieves a $900,000 GR, then that tells me, 4-car garage, that tells me that you will be able to develop and sell it. You can also develop and hold it. Remember, it's a slower growing area, so that depends if you just want the rental income and to pay it down and have some options. But just seeing that, and I'm glad I did, 900K, there is plenty of juice in that, I can tell you right now, for that initial land price, to carve it off, to build to, again, carve it off, say that land's costing me 100 grand because the value of that goes down 100 grand. 100 grand, 50 grand DA, say 150 grand of stamps, that's 300,000. And let's just say each one of those is going to cost me 400. That's 8 plus 6, is 1.4, and maybe there's some interest in 1.5, 1.6, and I can sell both of those for 900, 1.8. Yeah, it's worth digging into and having a little bit of a look into a little bit more if you can sell for 900 for sure. I think you're going to need to move the back fence and or demolish the shed. But yeah, that's my summary of it. Hopefully that made sense. Is yes, dig into the numbers, speak to local builders if it's in your personal name or in any other structure outside of self-managed super fund. Self-managed super fund, I don't know if it's a play, because if you can convert it, which is cool, but my issue against that would be you'd carve it off, you'd sell, you'd devalue the block. So you're converting it with the bedroom, and then you're devaluing the block by carving it off, but then you're not making any money from that. So what would be the point? I'd see if you can do it in your personal name rather than self-managed super fund. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Questions, queries, let me know. If not, I'll see you guys tomorrow.